Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. This is the She Wolves of Winter. I'm here with Lady Ashley and Lady Steffi, and we're here to talk about Bran in a storm of swords. Lady Ashley.
Hi, I'm Lady Ashley from the Iron Underneath. How are you? Thanks for being here tonight. We're going to talk about Bran. I'm so excited. So I hope you enjoy.
Sorry, Ashley.
Hi everybody, it's Steffi. No reason to check out my page, but we're going to be talking about Bran tonight, and I can't wait.
Okay. Let's see, Ashley. You or Steffi wanna give us your start off?
Steph, do you want to take it?
Yeah, sure, why not? Okay. So basically, this whole book is kind of outside of anything important going on. Like Bran starts his own individual journey with his little company right now, and they don't know very much of what's going on aside from the people that they meet at the Golden Tower. I forget what it's called. But from the little, and then you hear about Ramsay and the Boltons, and you find out very little through Summer's dreams of what's going on. And then, yeah, it's basically ends right at the wall at the Night Fort and past the Black Gate. So the first quote that I ended up coming up to was in chapter 1. It said, "Prince of the Green, Prince of the Wolfswood. He was strong and swift and fierce, and all that lived in the good green world went in fear of him." Now, Ashley might have more to say on this. The Wolfswood has a lot of ironwood, so I wonder if she has anything to say on the correlations on that. Then you have also the Blackwood correlation, right, on who used to rule the Wolfswood. And then
Right.
you also have the possibility of the War King, due to the Wolfswood traveling up to Dragonseed Point before some of it was burnt. Obviously the War King was defeated by the Kings of Winter, the Starks, and basically he killed all of his sons, beasts, and green seers, but took his daughters as prizes. Also, this quote, I'm gonna refer to it again when we go do the Night Fort, because I think this is the first quote that hits me when it comes to the Night's King and the story that old Nan revisits. And yeah, it's almost like that that nothing fears me kind of mentality. And also, when you look at this quote as well, and the like, no, like everyone should fear him. It also brought me to Arya's chapter in the Winds of Winter again, and I'll quote that as well. As I cannot be the hero, let me be the monster, and lessen them in fear in place of love. So, like again, it's that fear in place of like being fearful of someone or something in order to gain respect, instead of it being through love, which would be Ned's way. Yeah, that's just my thoughts on the first part.
That's awesome, Steffi. Nan, do you want to say anything on that before I do?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it's just like Steffi says. It's basically the journey from coming out of the crypts when they find Winterfell is burned up, dead people there. They come from hiding and go into the light in through the woods, and it's basically their trip north is what we're covering tonight, and all that happens with them and to them and around them that we can find on their trip to the north. And I have also have the little as a quote too. We'll get into that a little bit later on, Steffi. Ashley, you go for it.
Great, thanks. So, yeah, the journey is really cool because it's, we really hear a lot of judging and mirror I'm getting an echo. Are you guys hearing me okay? I've got a delay. Let me just mute and come back. That's better. Thanks. Okay, so actually looking at a lot of the symbolism of the journey itself, and I actually started looking at the hero's journey just because it goes into so many different characters, Danny, John, Bran, but some people skip steps. John gets every step. Bran also gets almost every step in the hero's journey laid out by Joseph Campbell from Carl Jung. But as far as the Ironwood in the Wolfswood goes, it seems to me like, I mean, I can't figure out this Ironwood if it's something that, you know, the Sentinels too, the Soldier Pines. It seems like more and more throughout about from A Storm of Swords, maybe at the end of A Clash of Kings, but The Storm of Swords, you really start to hear more and more about the Sentinel Pines. You know, seeing them so much. Maybe it's because of so many journeys north, but it's just interesting to me that there's always a Sentinel Pine where there's an oak most of the time. Like you've got the 79 sentinels and then the sentinel trees. And so it's like you've got watchers everywhere. And it's Green Dream that there's a way through to the other side of the wall. And Bran keeps telling him there isn't a way through, isn't a way through, and Jojen says there is because I saw it in my dream. So wonder if, you know, like I said last time, in the Godswood and Winterfell, it reminds me of either like something like alchemy, or if you want to go to the Garden of Eden, since that's something most people know, there's the tree of knowledge, and one is, you know, one's black and one's white. So it makes me think that the Ironwood is the tree of good and evil, the tree of knowledge, and the Weirwood is the tree of the tree of life. The Yggdrasil tree is the Weirwood. The Ironwood is the tree of good and evil, the tree of knowledge. So I wonder if there's something about that wood that acts like iron, that holds things in, remembers too, in a different way for somebody else. It's connected to the Black Stone somehow. I don't know. But with what happened in the Wolfswood, you know, it's got oak, evergreen, black briar, sentinels, soldier pines, hawthorn, beech, ash, chestnuts, ironwoods, and firs. It's got so much wood, and there's so many animals in there, that it sort of made me think about his journey to a Merlin-like character, because Merlin puts King Arthur in a couple different stories through into different animals, almost just like warging. He puts him in ants, he puts him in foxes, he puts him in all kinds of different animals so he can experience what life is like through those animals' eyes. And he puts him in trees also. And I just find it really interesting that the trees are from when they're actually in the Night Fort. And he says it looks like the tree was trying to catch the moon and drag it down into the hole. Bran is always looking at the moon, and he's always noticing the trees, as is Jon, noticing the moon as well. Those two always, and Arya too, actually. So they're always connected, those three. I find it really interesting that the tree was trying to catch the moon, like when they were in the Night Fort it was like the night's king is catching the night's queen, you know, and trying to pull the moon down because the moon is female. So as far as the Ward King goes, I didn't even really think about that part. I'll have to think about that for a second, and I'll get back to you on that one, because that's a part of it that I should have looked at and I didn't. But yeah, that's kind of what I got so far. I won't go into.
I like that. I like that, Ashley. Especially the part about the Garden of Eden, with the wood being the tree of life and the tree of knowledge being the ironwood. That does make sense, and it's a good reference. But I also found that it kind of reminds you of Robin Hood's forest, in the where the robbers, the outlaws hide out, which it could be another reference to, but it's a huge forest. And like you said, there are all kinds of trees and stuff in there. And the moon is very significant, not like you said, with all three of the children that have wolves especially. But when you think about the werewood, we calling it tree of life, but when you think of you think of like werewolves, That's the first thing you think about. And the moon, werewolves are regulated, their cycles are regulated by the moon's cycles. So is the moon and the werewoods, and the fact that it's a were on the front of that wood, and then you've got the tides, regulates the tides as well. So that's part of changing of the seasons as well too, with all of it coming together. So I do like that reference. Very good reference.
Thank you, and I love what you just said. That was really, really cool, because I had something written down it really fast. Oh, here it is. It's that Halloween, which is in Celtic mythology and Celtic mythology, Halloween is called Samhain instead. And Halloween originates from Samhain, and it's an old Druid rite that with the midnight culmination of the Pleiades cluster of stars. So when we were talking about the Red Wanderer being in the Moon Maid, Steffi, when John was conceived, maybe it could be that it was actually in there in the spring. So, or it could be that it might be, because this ritual, it culminates with midnight and the Pleiades cluster. It was believed that the veil dividing the living from the dead is at its thinnest when the Pleiades cluster culminates and reaches its highest point in the sky, which is at midnight. And I think George says, even in these books, that the wolves howl. They don't howl before midnight. They howl after midnight. And because there's some kind of rule, like, oh no, it wasn't in these books. It's from the Jungle Book, actually. It's the wolves don't howl before midnight because they would scare the other animals into thinking that they were coming for them. And so the other animals got a chance to be in the forest before the wolves started to howl. That was the wolves' time after midnight. So that's really cool. It ties in with the werewolf thought of yours. I like that a lot. And I just thought that, if this rite is at the end of autumn, it's October 31st, that's pretty much the end of their summer. So even if it's a false spring, it's the end, it's the autumn. So darkness and winter are coming at that point. So after Samhain, after Halloween, after the Pleiades cluster, which is probably more like the ice dragon, coincides with midnight, then the veil drops. And I wonder if that's the curtain of light, winter, or if it's just simply the veil that drops between the living and the dead. That's all I have to say on that.
Okay, I'll jump in here. Actually, Biotic Flux actually mentioned Cinderella and the changing at midnight, where she becomes, instead of this princess, she goes into like this transition, which you're mentioning as well, into this servant again. So it's very interesting that he mentioned that. Good analogy. As for, I'm gonna jump back a little bit. It's interesting that you mentioned the sentinel pines, because every time Bran keeps mentioning like these trees, all I keep thinking about the 79 sentinels. And to quote you, you said, "We have watchers everywhere." That's exactly your words that you just said when you were mentioning the sentinel pines. So it's very interesting because they were, we'll get to it, but they were shoved in the wall for that very reason, right? So it's weird that you just mentioned it without really mentioning the other topic. As for the moon itself, I do find it interesting that you did draw that conclusion, because every time it was mentioning the moon, I also was thinking of Drogo and how he's referred to moon of my life. So whether it's a female, I don't know, but like it's almost like this correlation. Also, when it comes to Bran noticing the ice dragon star, you also, I have to think of Dany being the star and the sun and stuff like that. So that's very interesting as well. But when you were bringing that up, I was continuously thinking of the Stark King, and his name is Walton, and his nickname, or his like AKA name, is the Moon King. So it's very interesting that the seasons are changing. You have this time of night expanding and all this stuff, and surprisingly, you have a king that is named this during this time of season. As for Cynthia, you brought up a good point in the moon and the tides, and that's very interesting when you think about Theon and how he was captured during this book by Ramsay Bolton, and how basically his tides are receding back or being drawn in, and yeah, so he's also going through this change as well without realizing it, and it kind of points it out. As for time in A Song of Ice and Fire, I've always wanted to look deeper into the time, but there's only a few hours that George R. R. Martin uses, right? Like he uses the owl, he uses the wolves, right? So yeah. I've always wanted to know, like, what hours point to what animal. If anyone has that, anyone in the chat, or if like you ladies find it, I would love to know it, because I feel like that would reveal a lot, especially when it comes to Azor Ahai, and how when Melisandre is giving that speech, she says, "In this dread hour." So what is this dread hour? Is that referring to an actual time? Because if that's referring to an actual time, that goes outside of the realm of the animals, which are used to describe the time. So maybe it's a certain time that is pointed to as the dread animal. Like, you get what I'm saying? Yeah, that's
totally. I do, and actually I have something to say about that, because I did look into the times. I got really interested in it, and I thought, okay, we've got the mockingbird, the owl, the wolf, the there's a couple, the fox, I think, and there's a couple more that I found. And it seems like, you know, the wolf would seem like it was midnight. And then the hour of whatever is something like the hour of the, I can't remember what it is, but it was something, the hour of the ghost or something like that, that would probably be 3 a.m. And the mockingbird would probably be in the late evening, I thought. You know, mockingbirds kind of I think they bring in the night, don't they? As far as I can remember. And then also they say dusk, dawn, sunrise, and they don't really say sunset. They say what do they say? I guess just dusk, dawn, and sunrise. I don't think I've ever heard them use sunset. So, well, because I do think that it has something to do with that, with what Melisandre's talking about, the dread hour. And I think that's probably from Poe too. It's probably got something to do with the Raven. I'll have to look at that. Dread hour, and then I also, that kind of makes me think of when Jojen and Mira told Bran that a Stark wasn't at Winterfell, and that that a Stark always needs to be at Winterfell, and they were talking about that, and I have it written down here somewhere. They said that oh shoot, sorry. I think that it was just something like the fact that sorry, I lost it. I'll find it again, but it was something that there was, when there's not a Stark at Winterfell, the wolves will return, he says. And they talk about how Winterfell is such a safe place, and how everybody goes there for safety in the winter and in times of trouble. They're kind of saying, whether you're at Winterfell or not, if there's a Stark at Winterfell or not, the wolves will always return. So I thought that was kind of cool, that people think and believe that the wolves will always return.
If I may, I've got a few points to touch on. That Samhain, the old Druid custom you were talking about, which is Halloween, that's Scottish, isn't it, Ashley? And
yeah, I
think, well, the Scottish do the same thing too, I believe. And then the false spring that you were talking about with John being born, it seems to me that, that you had the false spring at the time of, wasn't it during the Harrenhal, tourney of Harrenhal, and it only lasted a few years. So it, John born in the during the false spring. I don't know if it would have been an autumn by that time, because it would have been after the false spring.
right.
Right. And then the wolf's time, it being after midnight, I thought that was just so fantastic. The ice dragon in the books is something that Osha, the wildling, had taught them to look for the eye of the ice dragon, and that equals always takes them north. Well, we also have a North Star that all the ships and everything through the ages have guided them all over the world using that one North Star that's unchanging, and that's, to me, references the in that. And the sentinel trees, the 79 watchers on the wall, yeah, that's definitely got something. As far as them being watched, when they do get to the mountains, they definitely are being watched. And Bran actually sees some of the mountain clans watching them through the eyes of summer. So, it's it is known that Bran is alive. At least in the mountain clans, he has been seen by them and by the Ironborn kid, Wex.
Right.
Yeah. And the Dread Hour, going to that, I think that the Dread Hour is that Melisandre is talking about this hour of the approaching um, night, the hour before midnight, which would be when the actual night falls and doesn't end, where they lose the sun, for generations. And I think that dread hour is the hour that they're dreading. It's what's approaching them, and the hours leading up to midnight is where they're at now, which is leading up to approaching long night. Um, and the dusk dawn sunrise, but you also have moonrise as well. And the wolves returning. That was Jojen that told the little that the wolves will return, when he was saying that, you know, when there was a Stark in Winterfell, a girl could walk around in her name day,
Right.
and such. Okay, that's my catching up.
Thanks
Steffi, I
for
see you.
thanks for clearing that up. I could not remember who said it, but it was Jojen to Little. Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to like when you were discussing the times and the fox and the ghost and the mockingbird and stuff like that, all I can think about is, okay, obviously time is a very universal feature. So you wonder if either of these times are also given to, like, in order for you to name a time for me, it would have to be given to someone as an honor, kind of like a key to the city almost. Like I can see Cregan Stark being given the Hour of the Wolf because of his time in power and from passing those judgments and being like, oh, this is the Hour of the Wolf now for your service, like your time in office, basically. Also, I feel like the sigils and the times also have a lot to do with each other. So if there is a ghost, then maybe there's a house that involves a ghost. I'm pretty sure there is, such as the flock. Yeah, there's a reaper. I'm pretty sure. I forget what the house's name is, but yeah, I'm pretty sure there is. Also, like for the fox, you would think of House Florent and whatnot. So yeah, I'm pretty sure there is something going on there. It's just, for me, George R. R. Martin hasn't given us enough of the times. Like, he hasn't given us 12 hours. And if there is a 24-hour clock, that would be even more hours to look at. Also, for the protection of the Starks, see, there's a huge contradiction with what Little says to me. Like, no one is truly ever safe. You know what I mean? Like, you're talking about under this whole entire party, when they were journeying north to south with the King's Party, you're talking about Joffrey got his hand basically almost bitten off, right? So just because there's a Stark at Winterfell doesn't necessarily mean that everything's all hunky-dory. But I do see how, if people are educated enough to realize it, then they would understand that, such as Theon Stark and mounting the heads on spikes, right, the Andals, right, that is protection for your people. That is, but for the other people, that is viewed as being very dangerous. And the same can be said about Brandon Stark, or Ice Eyes. He basically gave the slavers to the slaves and then ripped out their entrails and then hung them on trees, and like weirwood trees. So if you're a slaver, you wouldn't necessarily view that as being safe, right? And then you're also looking at the right to first night, I think it is. If you're like, basically what Roose Bolton did was have this right to the man of the wife, that wouldn't have been a great thing, and she couldn't necessarily walk around naked because that would make her more of a target. So there is a contradiction to what he's saying, but I do understand that there was prosperity, right? You're talking about the North is the only province or state that isn't in debt in the Seven Kingdoms. So that's very, like, for that aspect alone, of course it's going to be better because there's going to be less thieving. There's going to be. Did I just drop out?
You're still there. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, my like whole screen froze for a second. It freaked me out. Okay, so, and then, yeah. As for Jojen, I can understand why George R. R. Martin is naming it A Dream of Spring, which is a dream of the wolves will come again, right? Which is referencing that exact quote. So yeah, it's all very interesting, that whole entire cycle. But while we are on the topic of Trojan, I also find it very interesting that we mentioned this earlier on in his earlier chapters, right? Especially at Clash of Kings. He basically comes and him and his sister pick out Bran out of both Rickon, right? And to deem him as this this flying wolf who needs to be escaped, which is, to me, all the Starks could have been that. But it's very interesting that he thinks that he doesn't have enough information in order to train Bran. I also think if when we're talking about this in the Night of the Laughing Tree, they believed that it was a Crannogman and most likely their father. Why would they send Bran north of the wall instead of sending him south? Right? Like why wouldn't they send him to the God's Eye for those training, and why north? Like it's almost like if you want to go to an art school, you go to an art school. If you want to go to a political school, you go to a political school. Like it's almost like there are different regions where you learn this this trait or these abilities. Also, I find it interesting that Jojen, in the very first chapter, is telling Bran to make rocks and to kind of make them in a pattern, which references the circles that we see more in the show, the spirals of the, oh, who am I thinking of? Ashley, you could probably mention the house, the Mallisters, I think.
Massey,
Oh,
I think it is.
Yeah, and the weird spirals, and they continue, and they're in threes. It's kind of like the Druid symbol. Yeah. And I find it weird.
Yeah, the Celtic. Yeah, I think it's Massey. Yeah.
So I do find it weird that Jojen wants him to make these particular symbols, especially if winter is coming and they're just going to be covered up anyways. Like I can understand him marking a tree, right? Like kind of like what bears do to mark their territory or to find their way back home and so on. But why would you want the rocks? Like what would that provide, unless it was like some sort of conduit? That's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, that's about it.
Oh, I like that you said conduit, because those spirals in Celtic lore, I mean, I don't know if you know the Newgrange tomb in Ireland, but it's a huge circular, it looks like a crop circle, but it's a really old, I think it might even be older than Stonehenge, maybe around the same time, but it's a huge circle, like a circular tomb, where there's a circle of stones, or there's a circle of stones that's now covered up, wood underneath it, and they were actually tombs that go in a circle. And this actually ties into the hours of the marked by animals, is that in the Newgrange tomb, you enter the tomb and the top of it has a cross over it, which is a circle with the cross inside is the alchemical symbol for earth. So when you go into the tomb and you're supposed to walk around, and there are kings that are buried under there. So they represent each planet. So I wonder if are marked by animals because they're marked for certain, like what planet that animal represents, or maybe house that something like that. Yeah, and I think you might be right about the sigils tying into it, because it's almost like the rings in the show that go around their planet, that history in the sky, like